The lights of the late-night studio gleamed like polished glass, and the audience buzzed with the kind of restless excitement that only live television could conjure. Jimmy Fallon, grinning and sharp, stood center stage in front of a massive screen that had just flickered, with the image of Elon Musk's face. It was a typical opening monologue, light-hearted, fast-paced, and loaded with punchlines. But what followed that night would push the boundaries of comedy and set off a chain reaction that no one in the building could have predicted. Fallon leaned into a joke, one that, at first glance, seemed no different from his usual nightly teasing of celebrities. But this time, it hit different. It wasn't just a jab at Musk's tweets or eccentric behavior. Instead, it was a deeply personal quip, veiled in humor but layered with condescension. He mocked Musk's intelligence, questioned his parenting choices, and ridiculed his South African accent in a way that felt less like comedy and more like cruelty. The studio audience erupted with laughter. But behind the scenes, the fallout had already begun. Musk had agreed to be interviewed live later in the show, a decision that now loomed like a thundercloud. Watching backstage, his expression hardened, his jaw clenched as the screen replayed the audience's laughter. What was meant to be a respectful appearance had been turned into an ambush. His team stood silently, sensing the energy shift, knowing he wouldn't take this humiliation lightly. It wasn't just the insult itself, it was the setting. Fallon had chosen live television, where millions were watching, to try to humiliate a man known for his unpredictable brilliance and fiery temper. The mockery wasn't accidental. It was deliberate, rehearsed, and worse, designed to provoke. Fallon thought he had the upper hand, but he underestimated how Musk responded under pressure. This wasn't a man who folded under ridicule. This was a man who reshaped entire industries because people once laughed at him. As the monologue ended and the house band played its jazzy transition, the atmosphere changed. Fallon, still smiling, welcomed the upcoming segment and teased Musk's arrival with more sarcasm, as if daring him to confront the joke. The crowd was unaware of the tension brewing backstage. They saw a talk show host cracking jokes, not realizing the storm gathering just beyond the curtain. Musk didn't respond immediately. Instead, he sat in the green room, silent and focused, not with rage, but with calculation. Every word Fallon had spoken echoed in his mind, not as insults, but as data. This wasn't just about bruised ego. This was about reputation, legacy, and principle. For a man like Musk, perception mattered. And tonight, Jimmy Fallon had crossed a line. When the commercial break hit, producers moved frantically, unaware that a public confrontation was about to erupt. They thought they were staging a light-hearted celebrity interview, but what they were really preparing for was one of the most intense on-air showdowns the network had ever seen. Back in the control room, the director queued up Elon's introduction with the same enthusiasm as any other A-list guest. But even he noticed the air shift as Musk finally stood, adjusted his jacket, and walked toward the stage entrance. The lighting techs turned down the house lights, and the band started playing Elon's signature intro tune. Fallon stood, beaming, unaware that his smirk would soon vanish. As Musk stepped into the spotlight, the cheers erupted. But this time, he didn't wave or smile. He walked straight toward Fallon, not as a guest, but as a man on a mission. The applause faded, and what followed would send shockwaves across social media, late-night television, and the entertainment industry at large. Elon Musk was not there to laugh. He was there to fight back. And Fallon had no idea what was coming. The crowd clapped wildly as Elon Musk took his seat, but the mood was unmistakably off. He didn't shake Fallon's hand. He didn't lean in. He didn't laugh. Instead, he stared forward with an icy stillness, the kind of stare that signaled control, focus, and something deeper: betrayal. Fallon, sensing the chill but still performing for the cameras, tried to brush past the awkwardness with his usual charm. He tossed out a few more jokes, hoping to lighten the air, but none landed. Musk wasn't smiling. He wasn't playing. What followed was not a conversation. It was a silent duel. Fallon asked the usual questions about rockets, Mars, and Tesla, but Musk gave brief, clipped responses. The audience began shifting in their seats. The rhythm was gone. Fallon's confidence faltered. Each attempt at humor fell flat, echoing awkwardly in the studio. His grins turned forced, his eyes darting to the crew, silently begging for backup. Then, it happened. Musk turned to him, calm but firm, and addressed the earlier monologue, not with emotion, but with precision. He dissected Fallon's joke, in front of the audience, exposing how it wasn't just satire, but an attack on character. He questioned why a show built on entertainment would resort to petty ridicule. And then, without ever raising his voice, he made it clear that what Fallon had done wasn't just inappropriate, it was cowardly. The audience froze. For a moment, even the cameras seemed to pause. Fallon's grin vanished completely. He tried to defend himself, stammering out excuses about comedy, context, and freedom of speech. But Musk wasn't done. He leaned in, not to argue, but to dismantle. He brought up other instances where Fallon had used his platform to mock without consequence, always targeting people he knew wouldn't fight back. But this time, he had. In the control room, the producer hovered over the mute button, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let the segment unravel. Ratings were spiking, but so was the risk. No one had ever seen Fallon so cornered, so publicly called out on his own stage. Fallon, now visibly shaken, attempted to shift the conversation, but Musk refused. He brought the focus back to something larger, the responsibility of influence. He spoke about how people with platforms should build, not belittle. His words weren't angry. They were calculated, deeply cutting, and impossible to dismiss. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or stay silent. Some did both. Others looked at Fallon, waiting for his next move. What was supposed to be a 10-minute celebrity interview had become a live reckoning. Fallon, red-faced and nervous, tried to transition to a pre-recorded skit. But Musk interrupted, pointing out that running away from hard moments was exactly the problem. Fallon had made a career laughing at others, but tonight, the laughter stopped. Fallon's team scrambled behind the scenes. Cards were shuffled. Segments were rescheduled. The director whispered urgently into Fallon's earpiece, but he was frozen. His usual rhythm was gone, replaced by a dawning awareness that the moment was slipping from his control. Elon Musk had turned the show inside out, and there was no going back. The audience, once boisterous, now sat in hushed disbelief. They weren't just watching a celebrity clap back. They were witnessing the dismantling of a brand, Fallon's brand. Musk hadn't come with anger. He came with clarity, and that made it far more devastating. By the time the segment ended, the tension hadn't eased. It had crystallized. Fallon forced a commercial break, his voice cracking slightly as he tossed to the screen. Musk leaned back, calmly adjusting his collar as the camera lights dimmed. Backstage, producers rushed in to contain the situation, but the damage was done. Musk wasn't just a guest anymore. He had become the story, and Fallon, for the first time in years, looked like the punchline. The studio lights dimmed for commercial, but the energy in the room didn't shift. It hovered, heavy, thick, unrelenting. Fallon sat slumped in his chair, staring blankly into the void of the studio monitors. Gone was the performer, the king, of late-night charisma. In his place sat a man who had just been stripped of his charm, dissected by the very guest he thought he could ridicule for a cheap laugh. Elon Musk remained in his seat, composed, dignified, and unwavering. He didn't glance at Fallon, nor did he speak to the handlers rushing in from the wings. He was calm in the storm he had just created. But to Musk, it wasn't chaos. It was clarity. For years, public figures had used his name for amusement, twisting his ambition into material for monologues, sketches, and satire. Tonight, he made it clear that the days of smiling through mockery were over. Backstage, the executive producers huddled in a flurry of panic. Ratings were soaring. Social media was exploding. Clips of Musk's takedown were already circulating, and the live audience reactions were being dissected by bloggers in real time. But the cost was undeniable. Fallon's image, once untouchable, had been publicly questioned in a way that couldn't be spun with a witty tweet or a heartfelt apology. The network's PR team scrambled to prepare statements. Damage control emails were drafted. Press releases outlined. Fallon's publicist demanded a private sit-down with Musk after the show to smooth things over. But Musk declined. He hadn't come to negotiate. He had come to respond. And as far as he was concerned, he already had. When the cameras resumed, Fallon tried to recover. He welcomed the next guest with a forced smile and a tone too high to be natural. The applause sign flashed, but the audience's claps felt hollow, uncomfortable. Musk was no longer on set, but his presence lingered like a scar. Every joke Fallon attempted afterward fell flat. The rhythm of the show had been broken beyond repair. Elsewhere, the world was watching. Online forums, news channels, and business blogs buzzed with headlines. Musk shames. Fallon on live TV. The day comedy crossed a line. Musk strikes back. Comment sections exploded with debates. Some defended Fallon's right to joke. Others praised Musk for confronting the cultural hypocrisy of punching down in the name of humor. But even among Fallon's defenders, something was different this time. The clip wasn't just awkward. It was sobering. Sponsors took notice. Some expressed concern over the tone of the segment. One major advertiser paused upcoming spots, citing unexpected deviation from brand values. The network board called for an internal review. The very foundation of the show, its casual mockery, its untouchable charm, was now under the microscope. And at the center of it all stood Musk, having said less than most but changed more than anyone expected. Fallon returned to his dressing room in silence after the episode wrapped, ignoring the frantic voices in his headset. For the first time in years, he didn't scroll through his mentions. He didn't check the ratings. He sat still, staring at his own reflection, wondering how a moment meant to spark laughter had instead become a referendum on his entire career. Meanwhile, Musk exited through the side door of the studio, greeted by a silent team that walked alongside him like shadows. No cheers, no fanfare. Just quiet resolve. He didn't speak about what had happened, nor did he need to. He had said what he came to say, and the world had heard it. By morning, major headlines across media outlets framed the night not as an interview, but as a confrontation. And unlike most showbiz scandals, this one wasn't fading. It was growing. Other celebrities chimed in. A few defended Fallon. Others hinted at having had similar experiences. It was as if Musk had lifted a curtain on something that had long gone unchecked in the world of late-night television. The fallout had begun, but the storm was far from over. By the next morning, the story had fully escaped the walls of entertainment news. It had grown into something larger, something cultural. Elon Musk's confrontation on Fallon's show had become a flashpoint, igniting national debate about the power dynamics of media, the fine line between satire and bullying, and the responsibility of those who shape public opinion. What was once dismissed as late-night humor was now being challenged as a machine that often silenced the very guests it claimed to celebrate. Clips from the show went viral across every major platform. Millions watched Musk remain composed as Fallon flailed to regain control. Think pieces emerged from every corner of the media landscape. Journalists weighed in. Comedians responded defensively, and former guests began recounting their own moments of discomfort on Fallon's stage, times when laughter had masked humiliation, while Fallon's team tried to shift focus, releasing Behind-the-scenes images and statements about misunderstood comedy, it didn't work. The moment had already imprinted itself into public consciousness. Fallon's charm, once his strongest weapon, now felt artificial to many. The same eyes that once adored him were now watching more critically, more thoughtfully. He wasn't cancelled, but he was no longer immune. For Elon Musk, the aftermath only bolstered his image. Known for innovation, risk, and a penchant for defying expectations, he was now seen as a man unwilling to bow before institutional mockery. This wasn't the first time he had faced criticism, but it was the first time he had stood in the heart of the storm and spoken plainly while cameras rolled. And that courage didn't go unnoticed. Public support poured in, not just from his fans, but from unexpected voices. People tired of the smirks, the safe jokes made at the expense of outsiders, and the subtle cruelty disguised as comedy. Musk hadn't come to be applauded. He had come to draw a line. And that single moment of clarity resonated with far more than just tech enthusiasts or entrepreneurs. It struck a nerve across generations. The network scrambled to respond. Executives met in emergency sessions, sponsors demanded assurances, and Fallon was urged to issue a formal apology. Days later, he did, addressing the moment with carefully chosen words. But to many, it rang hollow. The timing, the tone, the fact that it came only after public pressure, all of it diminished the impact. Musk, however, didn't respond publicly to the apology. He didn't gloat, didn't post, didn't revisit the event. He returned to his work, launching satellites, inspecting AI labs, and walking factory floors. He let his silence speak louder than any tweet ever could. And in doing so, he shifted the narrative not just about himself, but about how public figures deserve to be treated. The cultural shift wasn't immediate, but it began. Other talk show hosts took notice. Monologues became slightly more thoughtful. Interviews grew more respectful. Comedians still joked, but they became more aware of their targets. The ripple effect was subtle, but undeniable. In the end, Musk's fury wasn't about anger. It was about boundaries, about not allowing mockery to masquerade as charm, and about standing tall when the world expected a chuckle. He didn't flip a table, raise his voice, or walk off set. He did something far more powerful. He stayed. He stared into the heart of the machine and refused to play along. Fallon, once seen as untouchable, now carried the weight of that night with him. Every interview, every joke, every laugh filtered through a new lens. The charm hadn't vanished, but the illusion of invincibility had. And for Elon Musk, that night marked a new chapter, not as a tech mogul, but as a figure who stood against the current and didn't blink. He walked into a space designed to control the narrative, and instead, he rewrote it, not with rage, not with revenge, but with truth, and a refusal to be anyone's punchline ever again.